Greetings and welcome to Village in Motion. I'm your host, Marcia Boyles, and I'm delighted this morning on this Monday, December 14th, to introduce our Executive Director, Ben Cornthwaite. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Marcia. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. We're glad to have you and are always looking forward to an update from you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So hopefully we'll get some phone calls to supplement the conversation, but I have a couple of updates that I wanted to bring to you and share with residents here at Green Springs. So holiday times are always, there's a lot going on campus, and it's nice to see, but it's also busyness that sometimes is, there's some details I think that are important to share with the community as well. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to enjoy the various festive holiday displays in clubhouse buildings, and
they look very nice
throughout the
this year
as well. So we try to be diligent. I think the holiday time is always a nice milestone recognition, but some of the feedback I'd heard from residents and coming in as well is let's not turn them on too early. So let's not begin light shows and everything else at the very beginning of November. Let's get through Thanksgiving first.
Makes sense.
So we complied with that, and I think hopefully people are enjoying some of what the beauty has to offer. A couple of updates regarding the sprinkler project, or the insulation remediation project, if you will. So as you know, back in February of this year, we had a couple of sprinkler lines break as a result of some of the record low temperatures here in the Virginia area. And since that time, we had this engineering study that helped to really guide a scope of work for us to get in and fix certain components of our building's infrastructure, or building envelope, if you will.
Those were freezing up at the top of the buildings. Is that correct?
They were. There's really kind of three primary sources of issue with it. Some having to do with insulation gaps in the building, and then others more of a design flaw, I think, in terms of how the sprinkler systems were installed and where they were ultimately installed as well. So, a comprehensive building engineering study was conducted and completed back in October of this year, and from there we then put a bid out to various contractors to define the scope of work, as well as to bid on the project to remediate the efforts. So that work has begun, and we got started in Crestwood Court first. We've moved on to Oak Hill at the present time, and what that involves is peeling off a layer of the roof in each of the residential buildings.
I see we have a call already. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Featherstone. I live in Connor Terrace 201, and I'm very happy to be living at Green Spring, especially at this holiday time of year when everything looks so nice. I moved in over 7 years ago, and at that time I was very impressed with the hallways. They were classy, had charm and character, and had a nice residential feeling, not like a typical hallway in many buildings. But with the renovation of the hallways on the Main Street halls, all class, charm, and character has been removed, making them very ordinary and boring. In the last few months, the most recent change has occurred in Forest View and Maple Creek, which now have extremely bright lights, and which are most unpleasant. They hurt the eyes. I need to take my sunglasses whenever I walk down that hallway. So I hope that no more halls will be degraded and become void of class, charm, and character. And I wonder what the situation is on that topic. Whether all the hallways are going to have the arches whacked out. They were so nice. They gave it a residential feeling. And the places in between, where there used to be lights behind boards on the hallway, and those were the only ceilings in the hallways that had nice smooth plaster ceilings, and those lights on the sides behind the boards shone up on the ceiling and down on the floor. And those places gave the hallways character and a break from the monotony of the same thing over and over again.
All right.
Thank you for letting me vent.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Ms. Featherstone, for the call. Just to reassure you, as far as the arches go, the intent is to keep the arches on campus moving forward. I know I remember Kathy and I had a specific conversation about this relatively early in coming here to Green Spring. But in general, the Maple Creek and Forest View corridors were, if you remember, were forgotten or were left off of the prior life cycle renovation to address the Main Street floors when they were completed for the entire campus. And so at that time, the scope of work just simply did not include them. When that was brought to my attention shortly after coming to campus, we put a work project in schedule, work schedule in place to be able to tackle this project. And as part of that, the same design for Main Street was maintained through that, with the one exception being the lighting aspect.
Yes.
So early in the year, there was conversation about the railroad ties, and so I think we've found on campus that lighting, obviously is a kind of a personal
Yes.
matter. But what we had done was put 3 different light fixtures up in the hallways in Maple Creek as kind of a test pilot, if you will, to then incorporate some resident feedback to say which is the preferred product moving forward. And so we took the feedback that residents had offered in that respect and chose the product of what you see today.
These are ceiling lights for people who have not been over there. Terribly bright LED ceiling lights.
That's correct. So in looking at at lighting throughout the campus, last year there was a lighting study that was done on campus to evaluate, are there ways in which we can intentionally address lighting levels throughout campus depending on the function that occurs in a given area, to boost light levels and to minimize shadowing effects and to minimize some of what the existing lighting structure provides. And so the foot candles are being achieved in what is noticeably brighter. I was actually just in that area on the way down here just this
Yes.
morning, and it's noticeably brighter. So long story short is we incorporated resident choice and feedback in that light, and that's what was ultimately selected.
Her question, I thought, was a valid one, Ben. Are you intending to do that same thing in other hallways?
So our hope was that would serve as a new standard moving forward. So at this point, there are no plans to install those lights any further. However, what we planned for in 2016 were for 8 hallways to have life cycle dollars set aside and budgeted for in 2016. So there's no determined location as of this point, and the scope of that work and whether or not it would include lighting has also not yet been determined.
All right.
As far as the archways, though, to answer Ms. Featherstone's other question, is to keep the Main Street look and feel similar. We went ahead with the Maple Creek and Forest View project to do that identically as the logic set up on the rest of campus, so we weren't doing a one-off, if you would. But for all of the other life cycle floor spaces, the intent is not to remove those archways.
All right,
We'll
thank you.
keep those in place for some of the very reasons that Ms. Featherstone pointed out as well.
All right.
Okay. So we kind of jumped off the building envelope remediation just to kind of wrap that up. So each residential building will
Well,
have
now, when will
a
that be
level
done,
of
Ben?
work.
Hopefully before the freeze, deep freeze.
We hope so, but timing is up in the air a little bit according to weather, and there's only certain
Yes.
periods of time that can happen. So we've made plans, as we've shared with the residential community, to have an interim plan in the event that the work is not complete in given areas throughout the campus. And so there's all of the remediation likely will not be completed by the time the deep freeze hits.
So your
Perhaps-
plan is to do something to prevent the breakage.
So that's right, and there's nothing purely scientific that will say here's exactly the action that we can take, but the risk factors that present, notably cold temperatures for an extended duration of time, we have some temperature readings in those attic spaces that will be able to help give us a better sense of that.
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, in regard to what Ben is talking about, I understood from the report that the buildings with the apartments with the recessed balconies were the most vulnerable to have this problem. And I was wondering, are they going to be given priority going through with the buildings that have the recessed batteries? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the call, and you are correct in that the recessed balconies present one of the greater risk factors for the campus, and so the solution for those recessed balconies is, I was saying there were 3 different causative factors, if you will, and the insulation remediation is one aspect. The 2 other instances involve relocation and redesign of the existing sprinkler system in those locations. So the recessed balcony is one problem area. Now, in order for us to, we can't just tinker with the fire suppression system and say move the pipe from here to there. We actually have to have suppression engineers that give us the roadmap, if you will, to say exactly where and how that pipe needs to be relocated. So that engineering study and direction is happening as we speak, and so at the conclusion of that, we'll be able to then get in and do the work itself. That work will have to occur inside the residence unit. We're not able to access those from above. We have to access that from below. So that is a 5th floor phenomenon. So throughout the campus, we have about 60 recessed balconies that are affected by that will ultimately be remediated. Likely that won't happen until next year, and so that is one of the risk factors that we know will not be completed by.
So they will still be vulnerable this winter, probably.
Still be vulnerable. However, we are going to take action again based on the duration of those cold spells, if and when they arrive. When we have 70-degree weathers like weekends like we just had. Hopefully we'll be fortunate enough not to encounter that throughout the course of the year. So lots ongoing, but I just wanted to reassure residents that the work is actively has begun, and cynically we hear sometimes from residents to say, well, why did they wait so long? Well, there was a study that had to be done in order to dictate exactly what was going to happen and where it was going to happen, and it may appear to residents that we were just waiting for the cold to arrive before we began work, and in fact, there's just no truth in that. But
I hadn't heard that. I don't think people
I
are
hear many
quite that
rumors out
cynical.
there.
Oh, do you? oh, that's a wonderful one. No, clearly this is a very complicated kind of engineering process.
It is,
and I think most residents really understand that.
Yeah, and to try to help give resident perspective to it as well, we also have 3 residents that have volunteered to be a part of what we're calling an ambassador communication committee that will look at the details of the study, look at details of the work that's happening, and be able to just provide an additional level of communication to residents. And so that team has been mobilized and is working with Lynn and the General Services team, and we'll be bringing some additional communication to residents very, very soon here in the future.
All right, so there'll be an additional resource for information.
Sure.
Good.
So let's talk a little bit about dining services as well, and specifically as it relates to the Signature Dining Program. We've implemented the Signature Dining Program at Woodland Skies. There's been some additions at Jefferson, but the fundamental of the Jefferson's buffet continues, and we're moving forward at Fireside as we speak, where they had the soft opening on Sunday of this week, just yesterday, and we'll be carrying forward at both Fireside and the cafe for the next couple of weeks. So there are 3 fundamentals that I'm hearing feedback from residents on, and I just wanted to take a brief moment to address some of the questions that have been raised in that, and then also just some of the insight that has given us that may warrant additional tweaking, if you will. So the first has to do with menu fatigue. As you know, one of the fundamentals of the new menu is, rather than have menu items and ingredients changing every single day is to have more of a stable menu
Yes.
with a wider variety of choices on it that changes less frequently. However, I think residents have really only begun to see some of the change that occurs as part of that menu rotation. So, for example, the stable menu at Woodland Skies, as an example, is there that has 25 different entree selections on it. So the question I've heard from residents are, you mean we have to have these 25 selections for the next 90 days
Forever,
or 120 days
yes.
forever? And no, in fact you don't. So there are three levels of change that residents should expect, and some of that has already begun. So one was the introduction of daily specials, which we did about a week and a half ago. We launched a couple of featured items that will run in duration about 1 to 2 weeks. We're going to see what resident preference is on how long those daily specials will run. And so that might be some additional featured items above and beyond the typical stable menu. Secondly, an additional level of change that will incorporate some new food items on the menu will be pulling out the bottom sellers on the menu. So for example, the lasagna offering at Woodland Skies has not been a big success with residents, and there's various feedback why, but our plan would then be to say, for example, we'll pull the lasagna off the menu and supplement it with another entree item that hopefully will be
All right, and maybe a special
appeasement.
that has been particularly popular.
That's right.
Kind of thing. Sure.
That's right.
Okay.
And then thirdly, those are kind of two phased levels of change that kind of get layered on into the existing menu as well. And then the last one is a seasonal change that occurs, on a quarterly basis, so
Yes.
about every
All
90
right.
days, where we take advantage of seasonal ingredient items and that will be more parallel to the growing season of various produce, et cetera. So between each of those three levels of change, there'll be new items incorporated into the menu on a regular basis, ongoing. So although the 25 menu options are more stable in that fashion, there'll be an introduction of new menu items on a regular basis.
All right. I think that's quite reassuring, Ben, and absolutely will be popular.
Sure.
Good.
So that is kind of fits in the subject area that I'm referring to as menu fatigue.
Yes.
We kind of get tired of
Right.
menu items, and so that's a solution for that. The second is along the notion of wait times. So wait times, since we began the staggered seating process back in the summertime, have significantly improved. However, wait times are still a concern to residents, and part of that is there's some unpredictability to wait times at any given date, any given time at a venue. So as volumes of residents show up to a particular venue that we have no advanced knowledge of, you can run into situations where the restaurant's at full capacity, yet there are 40 or 50 people waiting to get into the restaurant.
Well, of course, Ben, that's been the situation all along.
It has.
I mean, we've always had
Yep.
wait times that were unpredictable, both for the staff and for other residents.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So that there's nothing new on that one.
There's nothing new on that, but as we launched the signature program, what we did was to introduce as a temporary measure a reservation period for the week of the launch.
Yes.
As really just some parameters that would help in the success of the launch of the new program. And what we heard from many residents was there's some appeal to that on an ongoing basis. So, but I also hear from other residents to say, I don't want to make a reservation every single day. I don't want to
Absolutely
have to,
not.
To fuss with that.
And 2 days in advance apparently is all you can do. And I think the worst of it, from a resident perspective, is that 10 minutes leeway. That after 10 minutes, if you're more than 10 minutes late, you lose your reservation. That we just can't live like that, most of us.
So it's an option, and the option is if you want to seek a reservation, it's available for you, and we plan to begin that on the 20th of this month. However, it's an option, and so you can also choose not to make a reservation, which is
All right. Now
just,
that was
just
not
fine.
that I think was not clear, Ben.
Yep.
whether or not it is feasible to come down without a reservation.
So, and it is, and our plan is, as we look at this, is to allocate the percentage of tables or the percentage of seats, if you will, according to the demand for, is the greater percentage of people seeking a reservation, or is the greater percentage of people not seeking a reservation, and that will kind of dictate what tables we're making available through that purpose. So. What I heard anecdotally from many residents is that as they went through that week-long period, in fact, I walked back one evening with a couple of ladies that were finishing at Woodland Skies, and they said, "Gee, it's only 6:15, and we have a 7 o'clock board game that we typically play. Now I have to figure out time between 6:15 and 7 what I'm going to do for the evening." And we had a chuckle to say that's a high-class problem to have.
Right.
Of how do I
Such
fill this 45
efficiency,
minute.
they don't know what to do with time.
So, and as you mentioned, part of our leeriness, if you will, of having reservations and why we've operated the community for 17 years without reservations is that there are some fall down points associated with it potentially. And that's where we want to go into this as a trial period to see how this works, knowing that it may not work for our community, but knowing that we tried it for the week and it certainly proved to have an element of success with it. We're also going to be open to that moving forward. So, so a couple of the fall down points are potentially, I have a reservation and I didn't show up, or frankly, I was running so far behind that we had to release a table for others that are waiting to get into the venue. So there are some parameters around that, and the parameters are not intended to be, tough love as much as they are parameters, so that we can allow the residents of the community to be able to have access to the venue, so that we're not holding open tables on a whim, hoping that Mrs. Smith shows up for dinner tonight.
Right.
Okay? So, and directions about how to make those reservations will be sent via the cubby later this week. And again, these are not intended to begin until December 20th here in the community.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I understand that yesterday someone has said that Woodland Skies has lost their Sunday white tablecloths. Is that a permanent thing, or is that just yesterday's event?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to your question. That's the first
Thank you,
that I'd
caller.
heard of that. So I'm not aware that that there would be any change associated with that. So I can look into it and we can follow up with you accordingly. So we talked a little bit about a couple of the feedback items that I'm hearing regarding the signature menu. So one was the menu fatigue. Two is the wait time and wanting to add more predictability to the dining experience overall, and so reservations are a potential solution for that. Optional reservations are a potential solution to that. And then the third area has to do with portion sizes. So I hear from some that the portions are sometimes we would only like a half portion, say for example, of menu items. And there's some difficulty that a half portion poses. I think the individual that's ordering it often has the mindset of, well, I don't want to be wasteful. I don't want to end up scrapping that amount of food. And truth be told is that some menu items, some food items are very easily half portioned. An example, a bowl of spaghetti. We can give you a smaller quantity of spaghetti in the bowl and not a big deal. A steak, cutting it in half, different, right?
Not reasonable.
And so our hope is moving forward, probably by the January timeframe, is to identify on the menu which items are half portion available. And although it may not always be as intuitive to a resident which items can be half portion versus which items cannot be, we're going to let our culinary chefs kind of drive which items are easily portioned in smaller portion sizes than others. So a bowl of soup is an example. Well, we can have a cup of soup instead of a bowl of soup, right? Ice cream I hear a lot about that, I don't want a huge heaping 2-scoop bowl of ice cream. Some people do though, in fairness. And so what we didn't want to do in launching this new program was to address portion sizes to be smaller because I would have been accused in the very beginning of, well, what are you doing? You tricked
Right.
us. You're now offering less food
Right.
to us.
Right. Right.
So, again, wanting to be transparent, there is something we can do about it, and we will asterisk or some way denote on the menu itself which items can be
That sounds like a
half-portioned moving
perfect
forward.
solution.
Yeah. So, and then lastly, and I know you and I have had some conversation about this as well, and just to put out there that some others may be experiencing some of the same, is that the carry-out situation, specifically in the evening, is also difficult for folks, I think, that are not seeking utilization of the pre-order in the store.
Right.
So, in other words, walking up to the venue at 6:15, placing a carry-out order at the podium, and then having a good experience in that. And so,
And in some cases, of course, being told that there was no more food.
or it's really space to be able to fit that into the kitchen production cycle, if you
Right.
will. It's not an absence of food as much as an absence of time to be able to get that.
Had already met their quota, I think was
Right,
the term
right.
being used.
So it's difficult, and as you've shared with me, and as a couple of other residents have shared with me as well, is that's something we have to think about and try to figure out a solution potentially for that. We don't have a solution today, to be very honest, but that's something that I think we have to evaluate a little bit further. So that's the carry-out process from 6:15 onward. That's the approach the podium standpoint. I've heard pretty loudly from others that the predictability in ordering through the store has been successful and has yielded at least greater predictability to pickup times, et cetera.
All right.
But knowing that doesn't work for all,
Right.
that we want to try to explore part of that other solution for that evening hour. So.
And Ben, the other major issue that I think almost all of us who use pickup are concerned about is the the times of pickup, and the fact that it's such a narrow window.
Yeah, and as we said at the onset of this new program, is that there's only so much food that can come out of a kitchen at any given time, and one of the elements is, how do you position yourself for service to be successful, and the funnel can only be so wide of orders that can go into the kitchen to be produced and put out to residents that are requesting that, and so some of the parameters are intended really to limit the width of that funnel, if you will.
We would just like to be in the broader part of the funnel, those of us who use pickup.
Right. It's the extreme minority of people, and it doesn't mean
Right.
that the experience should be any worse. It just simply means that we're talking about very, very small quantities comparatively, and so I think in general, wanting to please the masses, I think that there's been some accommodations accordingly. So more to come on that. We'll
right.
keep you and other residents
I was going to
posted.
say that will be the continuing saga, I suspect.
I think so, and as we get Signature launched at Fireside and the cafe, I think what we'll then be able to do is to go for a period of weeks to see what is the new norm, if you will. The program will have been fully implemented at that point in each of the venues, and then we can see kind of what behavior is driving, where demand is resting, and ultimately I think we can attack it accordingly.
All right, so this is really a case in progress.
It is.
Ben, I will say that on a personal note that I had dinner last night at Fireside, and that was the first Signature meal, and it was marvelous.
Great.
I have to say, it was the best meal I've had at Green Spring, I think.
Great.
So it was excellent.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, we're excited. The new menu, and appreciate residents' patience with it, because it's been a learning experience for all of us.
It's been a long process.
It has been, and the good news is that we're getting to the point where the fine tuning, the tweaking, the changing, we can begin to settle now into more of a routine. I think
right.
that'll be advantageous for all of us.
I think predictability is going to be a major
It's an important thing.
issue here. Well, I see that our time is up. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
I just want to leave you and the rest of the community with, just a very heartfelt appreciation for, it's been a very busy year together, and really appreciate you welcoming me into the community, and for all that you and other residents continue to do in our community. Last week I had the pleasure of attending the Staff Appreciation Fund check disbursement, and it's just awesome to see the generosity of residents expressing their gratitude toward our staff members, to say thank you for the hard work that you've done all throughout the course of the year. More than $292,000 was raised, which I think is just a huge testament to not only the service that employees are providing to residents in the community, but on the flip side, the generosity of our residents to appreciate and recognize that hard work in our staff members. So thank you to all that participated in that, and that found that as a way to brighten the lives and the holiday time for the many staff members affected.
Well, thank you, Ben. This has been most helpful today. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your coming and explaining many things that are on all of our minds. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.